Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of Food for Thought. So in this series that I've just kind of started out of the blue, I'm wanting to kind of go into stuff that it makes me even think, and it gives me even pause sometimes where it gives me, food for thought, hence the name, and just stuff to, help chew through. I think it's, healthy to, have just some things that you don't, immediately agree or disagree with, and sometimes, it takes time to mull it over and really think about it, and think of all the evidence pro or against, and have these different topics that we can really delve into, And so in this show, I want to kind of throw some things that I've already kind of sifted through in different points in life, like topics that have put me to a pause that I want to throw out there and throw to you guys to see what you guys think, and also show you the evidence, at least some of it. I don't want to spend half an hour going through every single thing that makes me go for a point or not, but I just want to go through some maybe the highlights that bring me to the opinion or belief that I have about it. And also, I kind of, with this show, I'm going to go into apologetics too, because it's part of the theology thing and all that. But for now, today, I'm just going to go over something I think is kind of important. Well, it's not just kind of important, it's the important, because in this, I'm going to go over Jesus' existence. Now you may be thinking, this is just a Christian, talking about the, Jesus' divinity and how holy he is, just preaching really. But what I'm actually wanting to go over in this video is kind of more on the sciencey, I guess more like the science point of view, what people would assume is, just almost what most of the world calls Muhammad, which is just more of a prophet from God. So I'm going to be talking about Jesus, the man, not Jesus, the deity. So I'm wanting to go over this and give proof, I guess, in a sense, or evidence at least. I'll say it like that, reasonable evidence, as it's in a court, that Jesus the man did at least exist. And hopefully if we can reach this point that you and I can agree that Jesus the man existed, well, what does that mean about everything else? All the eyewitness accounts of, if he existed, then what about the miracles that people saw him perform? And it can lead down a fun little rabbit trail we can go down. But that was for another video. Today we're just going to be going over Jesus. So the first thing that's kind of cheesy that I kind of want to tackle though is look at your calendar, right? You can see your calendar right now. But one thing we all know is that if we look back in history, if you ever look at a history text, or you look at and if you're a historian at all and you look back, to ancient Greece or anything like that, you'll notice that the calendar is split up between BC and AD. Do you know what those initials stand for? Before Christ and after death, the death of Christ. So if he didn't exist, that's a pretty impressive feat, I would say. And more than anything, though, it strikes me that some people come out and they'll say that they'd say that people just made him up, or people just based it off because it was easy because he was such an influential figure, the idea of him, whatever it is, the idea of him and his religion, that he didn't exist to start but started with the people who made it. I don't know, a lot of weird theories around it, but I say that if we can base an entire calendar system to when we look back in history, that's how we base it off of, is before Jesus and after Jesus. I say that's a pretty good idea of a good mark to start on, right? Next couple things that I find interesting is that we actually, back in the first century, we didn't exactly, nobody was really chronicling every single person and everybody's feats or anything like that. But what they did have were, historians or people who logged down what was going on in current day-to-day events. So there was this Roman senator at the time named Tacitus, who's wrote a couple of famous arts that all historians they all believe and all verify that it is very legit, and that what he did chronicle is now history. And in one of his chroniclings, you could say, in one of his the things he was writing down about Nero. Now, for anybody else out there who knows, Nero was infamous for killing Christians. He hated Christians. That's where we get the idea of Christians and people being thrown into the Colosseum and fed to lions. The persecution was harsh. So he chronicled Nero killing Christians, and in his chronicling of that, he actually talked about the origins of Christendom, and he says this all came back and started from when Pontius Pilate crucified Christus, which is Latin for Christ. And, you could say, that could just be a name or a moniker or anything. But the real important part is that people will use the idea when they argue the Bible that oh, we have no, we have no evidence that Pilate existed. The governor of the, the Lord owner of the area, the guy who's in charge of the legions, I guess there. And we have no evidence of Pilate, which is who the Bible chronicles as who did crucify and send Jesus to crucifixion at the end. But now, from a completely neutral, this guy wasn't a Christian. He was just chronicling what he saw. He was just writing down what history would be. And yet he wrote about Christ, and Pilate being the one who sent Christ to the cross. The next little thing of, an eyewitness at the time comes from Josephus, who was a Jewish general during the Jewish Revolution after Jesus. This is way after Jesus died, but after Jesus died, there's Jews rose against Rome, whole bunch of stuff. This guy was captured and taken to Rome, but he was released as a Roman citizen, and so he took on a name, a whole bunch of history there. But let's just say he was a Jew in Rome, and Jews didn't like him very much. But he did write a couple of famous historic documents called I think it was called the Jewish War and Jewish Antiquities, or Iniquities. But he wrote these books, and historians, verify that they're legit, real, and I'll put down the description if you want all these different historians that I could reference, and you can go see their pages. A few of them are atheists, but just chronicle that these are real. And in one of these things, Josephus talks about something that I find interesting. So before I get into this, preference. James and Jesus are actually common names in Jewish culture. They're actually not uncommon. They're decently common. It's kind of like a Michael, like nowadays, Michael, David, John, things like that. And so when people would talk about somebody and they'd have a name that was pretty common, they would kind of come with the moniker, James the blacksmith, John the carpenter, I don't know, they give the title of what they do, and that'd be something they give, or the carpenter over in the area, or who comes from this tribe, and that was how they talked about it. But here, Josephus talks about James, who, if you don't know, in the Bible is Jesus' brother. Well, to Mary, I guess, so half brother, yeah, and so he talks about James, but again, James being a common name, he has to preference which James is about to die. So he's about to chronicle this man's death, this Jewish man's death. So he says, James, the brother of Jesus, who they call Messiah. Now, historians find this to be one of the most incredible facts in history to verify Jesus' existence, because it comes from somebody who had been completely accurate in every other one of his writings. It comes from a time period after Jesus' death, who's somebody who never met Jesus, yet heard the word and the carrying on of Jesus, and is alive in that same time period, within 100 years, which in history is actually pretty rare to find written works that are within a certain time period of the original author, the original source, except for, the Bible, but we'll get into that in another video. So this is pretty much going to be it for the video. I just want to talk about this couple eyewitnesses that point to Jesus from an external, non-biblical area. Another thing, I guess I just kind of want to touch on is that, and I'll be talking about it a lot because this book will refer to it a lot, but Case for Christ. It was written by Lee Strobel, who is an ex-Chicago Tribune reporter. And he went in as an atheist, trying to debunk Christianity and seeking from kind of a legalistic standpoint, what is the fault point? What is the crux in Christianity, and how can I debunk it? And he went at it like a journalist, and also kind of from a legal standpoint. And the story itself is actually interesting. Who he interviewed both atheists and Christians alike to kind of get both sides and see where it is. And the crux, and I guess the focal point in the entire religion, both Judaism and Christianity, if you really think about it, because of what the Old Testament prophesies, is Jesus. Jesus is the focal point. He is the middle. He is Alpha and Omega. He is everything, right? And so he went at it trying to debunk the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so Case for Christ is a very fascinating book. I think that if you want to go and read it, it is absolutely worth every cent. And if you're an atheist watching this, I think that if you want even just to have an idea of what the argument is from my side of things, it is a good place to kind of see and peer into that. And you might end up having some good knowledge that you didn't have before that even atheists argue for, or at least, I guess, against Christianity in a whole. But I think you'll find that actually a lot of atheists who are historians actually believe that Jesus existed. Let me list off a couple. Bart Ehrman has credited to say that Jesus exists whether we like it or not. Historian Gerd Luderman believes that the man Jesus existed, does not believe his divinity, but has gone on to say that he does believe absolutely that the man existed. Dr. Gary Habermas is a Christian who believes that Jesus existed and also in his divinity, but is also, from the objective, real standpoint, believes that Jesus existed. And Dr. Bruce Metzger also is not a believer, but believes in Jesus, the man, existing. And not only because he's a believer, but he was an archaeologist who has uncovered multiple copies of the New Testament that were copies of the original, in various different geographical places over the Middle East. And so when you look at some of these names, you could, obviously there's 2 Christians on there, but there's also 2 atheists on there. All 4 believe in Jesus in one way or another. And so the point of this is I want you to start asking yourself a couple questions, because I think it's important to really get to this. Is if Jesus, the man, existed, both sides of your belief system, Christianity, non-Christian, believer, non-believer, both agree that Jesus, the man, existed. What else is true and what else is not true? And so the next video, I'm going to go over the Bible, I guess, in a sense, the realism of the Bible. How much faith, I guess, can we put in it? How real of a document is this? And I think it'll be interesting, but just some food for thought. All right, guys, see you in the next video. God bless.